A black sedan crossed the gravel courtyard. Dawn. No one was waiting at the gates. The British monarchy relies on a careful balance, remaining visible enough to stay relevant, yet hidden enough to survive. For decades, the security surrounding the royal family operated on a simple assumption that stone walls were as secure as the loyalty of the people working inside them. Then everything changed. Information moves instantly now. Traditional palace defenses are struggling against a new kind of digital exposure. According to recent reports concerning the palace infrastructure, a critical vulnerability left the family facing a raw human crisis. It concerned the children. The crisis didn't begin with a public statement. No cameras were called. Instead, sealed envelopes were hand-delivered to a small group of senior royals. The process bypassed normal channels entirely. No assistant courtiers were notified. No private secretaries logged the arrivals. King Charles sent direct, private orders and emergency counsel behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace. Inside the royal wing, schedules were instantly erased. Guard details moved into position. Prince William walked through the private entrance. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed forward. The Lord Chamberlain surrendered his encrypted phone into a secure box at the door, flanked by two security chiefs. Long-serving aides were blocked from entering. Even the guest list sent an immediate signal. Prince Harry was never summoned despite remaining within the wider line of succession. The exclusion was not an oversight. It was an operational boundary. King Charles sat at the head of the table. He removed his glasses, lowering them to the briefing file. The papers didn't deal with public relations or press gossip. The folder carried only two words: succession, security. Inside were the exact daily paths, vehicle orders, and temporary residential plans for William, Catherine, and their three children. To lose control of those coordinates is to lose control of the crown itself. For the king, looking at those names brought a sudden, visible look of fatigue. The danger had come from within. To understand the silence in the room, the council had to look back 6 nights, to a private continuity rehearsal at Windsor Castle. The drill was designed to test how quickly the heirs could be moved to safe locations during a national crisis. Every variable was classified: the vehicles, the hidden routes, the exact timing. The planning was kept so small that normal staff had no idea it was happening. William had kept the exercise a secret from his children. He wanted them to think it was a game. Just a practice run, he had told George. He wanted to protect his son from the weight of his future role. Then the unknown vehicle appeared. As the rehearsal ended, the black car materialized along a restricted perimeter fence. It was parked exactly where Prince George's vehicle was scheduled to pass through just minutes later. Spotting the vehicle, William's security team swerved, reversing the car back into the inner courtyard. William personally opened the door when his son returned. His voice stayed calm until the boy was safely inside. Once the children were gone, his composure broke. His pen bent between his fingers. The secrecy should have made a leak impossible. Only a handful of approved logins could open the file where the rehearsal route was stored. Yet, the investigators found a clear digital footprint. The rehearsal schedule had been viewed and downloaded 37 minutes before the vehicle arrived. But there was one problem. The download hadn't come from an outside hacker. The system log traced the access directly to a terminal assigned to Queen Camilla's household. William sat at the table staring at the technical evidence. The proposed new rules would give him complete control over his family's safety, bypassing the shared palace network entirely. But that independence came with a dark realization. Every school run, every family visit, and every private escape would now be heavily monitored. Princess Catherine sat next to him, speaking quietly. She supported the tougher protections, but she held a firm line. She would not allow fear to control George, Charlotte, and Louis. She wanted safety without imprisonment. William looked down. "The danger isn't distant anymore," he whispered. "We can't pretend." Across the table, Queen Camilla watched her husband. Her private secretary had been kept outside the door, a clear sign that her household's clearance was already gone. When the records were placed before her, she moved her chair back slightly. "Neither I nor my staff authorized this," she said. Her voice was tight, defensive. Princess Anne leaned forward. "Cold, logical, intention no longer matters," Anne said. "The system failed under your credentials. The hole has to be plugged." King Charles looked directly at his wife. No one spoke. A page turned. Somewhere in the room, a pen rolled across polished wood. The king asked a question no one expected him to voice so plainly. Can you guarantee that every person working under your authority is loyal? Camilla's face hardened. The security chiefs laid out the facts. There were three distinct possibilities. A staff member had been careless, a terminal had been compromised, or someone inside had deliberately passed the data along. The shared system was dead. The king looked down at the new organizational chart. The document shifted real power away from the old court and directly into William's hands. It was a sign that the future was arriving much faster than Charles had ever planned. Charles picked up the pen. Nobody realized what signing it would cost him. Charles stood near the library window. William remained beside the closed door. The king broke the silence first. I resisted separating household authority because I believed visible unity protected the institution, Charles said. Now I understand that hiding weakness allowed danger to grow. Unity without trust is only appearance, William replied. Appearancers cannot protect George when confidential movements escape palace control. He didn't want a victory. He wanted a guarantee. The king lowered his eyes. Concern for family harmony placed my grandson in unnecessary danger, Charles said. The apology was simple, but it carried years of hesitation and fear. William finally lowered his guard. George asked me if being an heir meant strangers would always know where he was, William whispered. The question stayed with me. It makes the crown feel less like a duty and more like a shadow over his childhood. The king took the new security order. He handed William full operational command of the succession security structure. Then, using his own pen, Charles added Catherine's name in his own handwriting. They would hold joint authority over every decision affecting George, Charlotte, and Louis. The decision changed everything. Father and son left the library together, no longer divided over control. By midday, the news reached the public. Broadcasters interrupted normal programming as the palace confirmed that Charles had approved an independent succession security command led by William and Catherine, with Anne providing direct oversight. Outside Buckingham Palace, a newspaper seller lifted an afternoon edition carrying the enormous headline, "William Takes Command." The crowd fell briefly silent. Camera shutters burst across the forecourt. The public realized they were witnessing a transfer of responsibility without a transfer of the crown. The fallout inside the palace was immediate. The compromised staff member was dismissed. Camilla's office accepted the external review, and every remaining user was personally verified. No borrowed credentials, no informal permissions, no quiet exceptions. Camilla watched the broadcast in private. She reached for the remote before her name could be repeated and switched off the television. The dark screen reflected nothing back except the cost of trust already lost. At Adelaide Cottage, Princess Catherine listened as George laughed with Charlotte and Louis nearby. The children sounded untouched by the crisis, but officers were already tightening security around their home. She felt relief because they were safer. Yet that relief carried sadness. Another protective wall had risen around a childhood she had fought to keep warm and ordinary. Succession security isn't simply about protecting who will inherit the crown, Catherine told her staff. It's about protecting the human beings who will one day carry its weight. The council marked the moment the monarchy stopped using secrecy as a substitute for unity. Charles preserved the succession by sharing power. William protected his children by demanding accountability. Palaces aren't protected by stone, they're protected by trust. Somewhere inside Buckingham Palace, another folder was quietly locked away. This time, only 3 people knew where it was. The heavy mahogany doors closed. The debate turned raw. Queen Camilla argued that stripping her office of security access would humiliate her before the entire palace staff. It would signal an absolute lack of trust. She warned that moving too fast based on a computer log would create a public perception of a house deeply divided against itself. The king did not look up. For years, Charles believed that keeping the peace at home was the best way to keep the institution stable. But looking at his son, that belief vanished. Protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis has to come before anyone's pride, the king said. His voice faltered slightly. Careful. Traditional. William spoke next. Short. Direct. Military. An unauthorized vehicle bypassed our security and sat on my son's emergency route, William said. The system failed its primary duty. I will support no compromise. Princess Anne folded her document. We have a history here, Anne said. She produced a separate file detailing 2 previous access irregularities over the past year. In both cases, sensitive travel schedules for William's children had been viewed without authorization. The king had quietly contained them, refusing to punish anyone to avoid a bitter family dispute. The room went cold. By trying to keep the peace, the king had allowed the vulnerability to grow. Charles looked at the floor. The leniency had been a mistake. The consequences came quickly. Under the emergency order, Camilla's household was completely cut off. Her staff lost all access to transport schedules, protected residences, and state continuity planning systems. Outside investigators were brought in to audit every single phone and terminal in her department. Seeing her office dismantled, Camilla turned to Charles. A senior aide gave their access credentials to a temporary coordinator. She admitted, "I learned of it hours ago. I wanted certainty before exposing a loyal member of staff." It wasn't treason, it was carelessness. But sharing restricted credentials broke the absolute law of succession security. Charles listened. He did not raise his voice. That made the moment worse. The original breach might have been a mistake, Charles said. Hiding the admission was a choice. The balance of power had shifted forever. Camilla was left alone in the chamber, realizing her defense had cost her husband's confidence. While William sat inside Buckingham Palace, finalizing the restriction, across the city, someone already knew. Investigators delivered a documented update identifying the unauthorized vehicle. It belonged to a contracted commercial photographer who had received an anonymous message containing their rehearsal time. The discovery confirmed that confidential data had traveled far beyond palace walls. Charles read the report once, then summoned William to his private library. No advisors were allowed inside. No secretaries waited nearby. Only the king and the man who would inherit his burden were called to face what came next.